If psychology and pop culture had a baby, they'd call it Shrink Tank.
A new paper reveals more intelligent people are quicker to learn and unlearn.
90% chance that there's some weird animal out there. Yeah.
Stern's been doing this forever and far more extreme.
From Nashville and Charlotte, this is the Shrink Tank Podcast. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dave Verhagen here in Nashville. We've got a great show for you. Our trending topic today is Black Panther. Lots to talk about there, but first let's meet our Charlotte panel. Dr. Emma Kate Wright is here. Dr. Emma Kate is on her 30th birthday today. Yay!
Yay!
Oh, you look 30. There's something older about you.
I'm old now.
What will you do for your 30th birthday?
Well, I've actually celebrated my birthday over the weekend. I had a bunch of friends and family go to several breweries in town, so that was fun.
Very nice.
Craft beer.
Did you get anything fun?
No. That's not true. That is not true. I actually have a recommendation that I'm going to save for a doctor's orders.
Okay.
You know, fun ends when you hit 30 days.
Right. It's over.
It does end when you hit 30.
It's so over.
Yeah.
And Sean can cut this out in post-production, but one of my favorite birthday salutations for women once they turn 30 or above is, you don't look a day older than Barron.
Oh.
So basically,
Opa.
wow. All right, there it is.
Well,
So
Frank.
happy birthday.
Yeah. Well, Frank, what did you do for your 30th birthday? Do you remember?
Oh.
He bought a 8-track.
I
Cried.
have no earthly idea what I did for my 30th birthday.
I'm
none.
sure he was alone and sad.
I don't even know where wait.
He got a haircut with Kel.
I do know. And you were there. What? No, you weren't. We went to dinner somewhere.
Just
but
the two of you?
I was here in Charlotte.
All right. Well, that was a great
Glad
story.
I shared.
That was a great
glad I
trip
shared
down
that.
memory
Really
lane.
helpful.
That was Dr. Frank Gaskell, by the way. He's also on the panel. And Jonathan Hedderly rounds out the panel. He's our certified Asian. And each week, Jonathan trolls the internets and the World Wide Webs to find great stories of psychology in the news in our first segment that we call
Being Human.
So in the wake of the tragedy in Parkland, Florida, where a gunman killed 17 students and staff, the Trump administration and many Republicans have said that the best way to end the constant stream of mass shootings is by combating mental illness. And while some think this is a reasonable idea, others aren't so sure. Experts say that the public has to be careful on how it thinks about gun violence and mental illness. Otherwise, it could stigmatize those who suffer from mental health issues. The APA report from 2016 says that fewer than 1% of firearm homicides are committed by a person diagnosed with a mental illness, and it appears much more likely that the mentally ill will hurt themselves than others. Emma Kate, what are your thoughts on the issue of gun violence now being introduced with a conversation about mental illness?
You know, truthfully, I have a really hard time with this because I don't like that the two are being linked. I think one of the things that was so fascinating that this particular article mentioned was people who were unable to purchase guns because of their age, criminal convictions, history of addiction, all those sorts of things. They were the ones that were essentially or they were the ones doing a lot of these shootings. And I feel like we have to think more about people's decision making, and we need to be really pushing for coping skills and anger management and frustration tolerance. And, we need to shift it away from mental health and just more about access to guns. And I think everyone immediately goes to hate on the NRA, and that's a piece of it, but there's so much more about our culture in terms of how we view violence and how we go to guns. And I think about Australia and how they had a mass shooting in 1996, and they had over 500,000 people sell back their guns to the government, and they haven't had something as significant since then. So there's just a larger question about our culture and how we're facing these issues.
I don't mind having the conversation about the mental illness linked to gun violence, but it's a dodge, really, because the issue is availability of guns. I mean, certainly there is a mental health component, but not always. You look at the dude who shot up the concert in Las Vegas. I mean, the puzzle there is that the guy didn't seem to have any kind of mental health issues that were, that evident. He was taking anti-anxiety medicine, but beyond that, it wasn't really super clear. Whereas this kid in Florida, it seems to be definitely a troubled guy. But if you look at the kind of correlation between availability of guns and per capita shootings and firearm deaths, it's almost a straight line. It's as high a correlation as you could get. And you guys have seen the memes that are like, it's interesting how mental illness doesn't kill anybody or doesn't result in mass shootings in Canada and Australia and New Zealand and so on. In other words, it's like they still have the same base rates of mental illness that we do. They just don't have the same nearly close base rates of mass shootings. So I don't mind having the conversation as a component, but it's really a dodge to get away from the gun issue.
For me, we do not live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy. And
An Olive Garden? What?
yes.
Okay.
And the NRA and different health insurance companies just flood DC with money to get their agenda forward. And it's about power, money, and influence. And it's just ridiculous. I can't understand it.
So here's my question with this most recent shooting. This one feels different. Now, I did think that the Sandy Hook one was going to be the turning point, and it wasn't. And that was shocking because you had little itty bitties that were killed, and a lot of them. But it feels different this time because you've got kids who are involved who are now the ones who are leading the charge. And so although there's all the usual online smear campaigns against these kids of they're being paid or they've got some other agenda or, whatever, I don't think that's going to slow them down. I think that these kids are mobilizing in a way I've never seen before. So I'm wondering if you guys feel like this might be something different this time.
I do, and I think part of it has to do with the times that we live in now, where there is greater advocacy and protest and movements coming out of the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, the Women's March. So this is something that's kind of building off of the public awareness of standing up to our government and the powers that be, that change needs to happen. I think that's number one. I think you already touched upon Sandy Hook, is you have the survivors now that are speaking out. You also had, because that they were teenagers at high school, you have the footage of them live tweeting or texting or capturing a video on their smartphones, the shooting in real time. So you don't just hear about these things after the fact, or you hear about students being led out by SWAT teams. There's an inside view on how people were coping, what they were saying to their loved ones. So you just can't escape. It's almost this immersiveness that now the bystander, the public gets an idea of what it was like for the survivors and the victims of being in the shooting.
I'm going to be the cynic and say this ain't going to change anything. I don't think there's a political will. And I'll say this a million times, there's too much money. There's too much at stake for people who just want to stay in office. And they're just going to create their big bankrolls to stay in office. And the other thing I would say is, at least right now, this is all irrelevant. Because you may have to have a 10-day waiting period in California, or you may have to have some kind of a background check. Well, all I have to do is go to a gun show and I'll just buy a gun there, and I don't have to have any background check, nothing. I'm just going to go there or buy it at a flea market. So I think the only thing that's going to change is if these young people grow up and go into office, or there's some big change politically in the fall, which I don't know. I'm very cynical about all of it.
I'm going to side with Jonathan and Dave just out of sheer will and hope that because of the movements that we have seen, there is this political energy that we haven't seen before. I mean, the fact that there are now like bulletproof backpacks, that is unacceptable that we have to even be talking about something like that. So my hope is that these kids can truly start to pave this way, because to hear, that they're trying to smear children, it's just preposterous. So I'm gonna be an optimist.
Well, I'll tell you for myself, there's so many things out there, so much to care about or not care about, so many issues. And so you can't care about everything. But for me, this is one of the two issues that I'm gonna go to bat on. And one is DACA and getting that resolved in some good way. And this is the second one, is like I am going to commit myself to actively working against people that take NRA money and who don't vote for more common sense, we'll call it, gun reform. And I'm going to be more vocal about that. I've not historically been super politically active. I've voted and I've done, but those are the two issues that for me have risen to the level of like, I just feel like it would be wrong not to stand up for those things and push. So I'm hopeful. Jonathan?
Yeah. I mean, my 15-year-old daughter and I, we're planning to go to the March for Our Lives on March 24th up in Washington, D.C. And I think we're seeing on all levels of demographics and generations, there's this anger and there's this call to action. I mean, I think even social media, a lot of people after the Parkland shooting happened said it's time to move past thoughts and prayers. Like
right.
it really is about action needs to change, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. My in-laws that are in their 60s and 70s, they're planning to go to the March for Our Lives. So you're seeing every generation say this is unacceptable for our nation to kind of be suffering from this when there's so many common sense steps that are being overlooked. And that really about the Parkland shooting, there's whether it be sort of the mental health piece and the warnings that we had about this kid and the FBI warnings, or just common sense laws about gun background checks. And there's just a lot of common sense that is missing in our nation right now. And it's just baffling. I feel like we're going backwards as a culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are. And like we said at the beginning, I'm great to talk about mental health issues and violence and gun violence. In fact, I have a couple of national conferences that I'm speaking at in the coming year, and one up in Canada about this topic. So it's not something that I think is a small issue, but it's a dodge. It's when this gets thrown out as the front burner, it's really a dodge, because in other countries that have the same base rates of mental illness, they do not have the same base rates of mass shootings. It's just, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. It's something unique to our culture and our culture of gun worship. So let's hope this is going to make a change this time. I'm rooting for the kids in Parkland for sure, and not just rooting for them, but want to join them in what they're doing. Well, let's change gears and go to our second segment, which will be a little more fun and light. And we're going to talk about Black Panther, the movie that is unbelievably huge at the box office. Let me give you some stats. It is a huge opening weekend with over 2 million ticket sales domestically. It's the largest February opening weekend of all time, the largest winter season opening weekend of all time, the largest President's Day opening ever, the largest Monday box office ever, the second best 4-day gross ever, the second highest opening for any comic book adaptation, the fifth fastest film ever to $200 million. This is a phenomenon, and we're going to talk about it. Lots to talk about with this, but we're going to welcome a special guest to our panel. Welcome Bea Moise, everybody. Yes.
Hello. Hello.
Right. Bea is a therapist at Southeast Psych. She has a master's in mental health counseling. She is a specialist in applied behavioral analysis. Bea, before we get into Black Panther, tell us something fun or quirky about you.
Something fun or quirky about me. Well, I don't know.
She's a Star Trek nerd.
I am a huge Star Trek nerd, and I do love everything sci-fi. And I'm a huge Marvel fan, so I guess that's fun and quirky, I guess.
She speaks lots of languages.
I do speak, and I'm Haitian. I guess that's the best part.
That would have been a good lead off, just like I'm from Haiti.
Yeah. Yeah.
She says it as an afterthought. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I'm
wait.
from
and
Haiti.
yeah, I'm
from
Haitian. I'm
Haiti.
from that country.
So we're going to talk today about Black Panther. We're going to talk about the quality of the movie itself, what its success means culturally, the importance of Black superheroes, some of the themes that come out of the movie. But let's start with just talking about the movie itself. So, Bea, I know you saw it. Emma Kate, did you see the movie?
I did.
And Frank?
I did not.
And
Boo.
Jonathan?
I did not.
Okay,
Boo,
whoa,
really?
that's interesting. So, me and the two women. So we're gonna just focus on the three of us for a second, and I'm gonna ask you, Bea, what's your take on the movie and how good it was? What's your quick review?
My quick review would be the movie was phenomenal. It was absolutely well done, well written, great acting, great action scene. Overall, I would give it a 5. It was really good.
5 out of 10.
10 out of 10. I was thinking 5 out of 5.
Okay, have to be clear on those scales.
Sorry.
So it was a solid 10, huh?
It was a solid 10.
All right, Emma Kate, how about you?
I thoroughly enjoyed this movie just from the sense of strong female characters. Visually, it was beautiful. I thought at times there was a little bit too much CGI, but overall, the costumes, I mean, it was awesome. I really had a lot of fun watching it.
I have a slightly different take, but I will tell you, punchline for me, definitely go see it. It's a very good movie. I felt like the first half of the movie was kind of standard Marvel superhero fare. And I think it was a cut above maybe the typical Marvel movie, but, kind of in the B range for me, like a good solid superhero movie. I think the second half of the movie, when the villain took center stage, Michael B. Jordan is a great villain.
He was awesome at basketball, too.
He plays a character named Eric Killmonger. And I would say maybe arguably the best villain in the Marvel universe. Once that character got to center stage, I think the movie was exceptionally good. And it went to a level of emotional depth,
Right.
because you have a well-motivated villain. And, the argument I've always had with the Marvel universe is every movie is such a template, and it's always like, the Earth's going to be destroyed or the universe is going to be, the stakes are so high that it's not going to happen. And so it doesn't, for me, kind of hold me in this kind of like really what's going to happen. In this one, the stakes are really high, and there's a question about what's going to happen. And so you have that along with these well-motivated characters, very good female characters, a great world that's been created. The second half for me was outstanding. So I'd say first half good, second half great. That'd be my take on it. B, what was your take on the characters, particularly, well, all of them, particularly the female characters?
Well, I must say, Denai, or Okoye, she stole the scene for me. I was looking forward to watching Lupita be, on the big screen and enjoying her character and Angela Bassett, but definitely Denai stole the scene. Her empowerment, her beauty, her strength, everything about her in that character was phenomenal. So she definitely, I think, shined in the movie. And I also do agree with you as far as Michael B. Jordan in the movie. He was a very likable villain. He's definitely a villain where you feel like you can identify with his cause and think, yeah, I could see why I would agree or side with this particular villain. So he was a likable villain. I definitely could identify with him in that aspect. Overall, the whole cast was phenomenal. Like, everyone did a really great job, but the women are really the people that I most enjoyed watching, because the last time I got to see females in this type of action was Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman don't look like me. So to see, an all brown cast girls just being really awesome was something that I enjoyed. It was definitely something that I have never seen before. It's not something I've ever witnessed. And it brought me great joy to enjoy this with not just, me as an adult in the little Bea and me having this party, like, yay, they're like me, but also to show to my daughter who thought, Mommy, they're brown just like us. And I thought, wow, that is just amazing.
Yeah.
So,
and I had the same experience. I have two of my children are from Africa. And so I saw it with one of my kids who's from Liberia and her roommate who's from Liberia and another African-American guy who's dating another one of my daughters, and just to experience it with them, it was very affirming of African females, and it was also very affirming of Africa. And I thought that was very cool. Even though it's a fictional country, it really is about Africa. Africa is a character in this story, which I loved. Emma Kate, how about you? Any characters that jumped out or stood out for you in this in this movie, and why?
I'm going to second what Bea said because I am familiar with Denai from The Walking Dead. She plays the character, I think, Michonne, and she was just exceptional. I mean, her loyalty to the country within the movie over love, even, spoiler, sorry, just she was so fierce, and yet I don't know, she was still relatable, and I guess there's just so much character development for all of these women. The young sister in the movie who was extremely intelligent and, also fierce and really, willing to get into the action. There was just so much about these, I guess, side characters that really felt like they were part. I mean, it wouldn't have been the same without them, to be honest.
right.
Yeah, very, very strong. So let's open this up a little bit. And even for Frank and Jonathan, you haven't seen this, but I led off with all the stats about this movie. It's the biggest this, the second biggest that in terms of box office. And this, within a year's span, we've got two movies that have shown the conventional wisdom to be a lie, that you can't have a superhero movie that's anchored by a woman. You can't have a superhero movie that is featuring primarily persons of color as the protagonist. Those things are not only not true, they're way not true. So, Jonathan, what's your sense of what this means culturally? Is it that this is just the time for it, or that it's been true all along? Or what's your take on what the success of this movie means?
Well, I think we are in a moment in time where general audiences are hungry and open to breaking down the barriers or the partial lie that a female superhero film or a superhero film that's based primarily on Black culture and a Black protagonist can't find a mass audience, mass appeal. I think that's number one. But I think number two is that Marvel Studios and Warner Brothers, they also put enough talent and money behind the projects, because when you think about a lot of films in the past, it's almost like an experimentation. They're not willing to take that full risk. Like, this is one of the most expensive Marvel movies ever, and the amount of money that they've put in for the actors, the cast, for the marketing, they've put the money behind this like it is a Star Wars film, like it is an event movie, and that raises awareness, that raises enthusiasm. You haven't seen that in the past. But then when a movie would be underperforming or it wouldn't get the critical response, they would say, see, it just proves that there's not an audience, people aren't hungry for that, but they really didn't put their full weight and support behind the marketing campaign.
Yeah, I've been, and you listen in prior episodes, I'm sort of down on superhero movies. And this is the one I'm excited for, and I didn't think I'd be excited for one. But when you were talking about doing the research in terms of the stats of this film, some of the most amazing stats I found was that the Black Panther can run 58 kilometers an hour.
Oh, boy.
Can jump 20 feet and can kill a giraffe. Mm-hmm. Like, seriously, they can kill a giraffe. So that makes me really want to go see the Black Panthers. That's awesome.
Uh-huh. Good. Good.
This moment of cultural sensitivity brought to you by Frank Gaskell.
Frank's way up there on the cultural awareness. B, any thoughts about what the success means culturally?
Culturally, the success of this movie is huge. So I can honestly say we have this saying in the Black community, in our community, if you do something right for us, we will show up. If you do something right by us, we will show up. So we're not surprised at the ticket sales, and we're not surprised that, you did something great. We're going to show up and we're going to support it. But culturally, I've even seen other sayings about how this should be shown in the history books, or this could be a Black History Month type of celebration, or this should be something that every school show, during Black History Month, because it was that big of an impact. I mean, culturally, there hasn't been anything like that, at least for as long as I've been alive. Like, I haven't really experienced anything like this or seen anything like this. And most of my friends who are not into comic books or superheroes or anything like that, they went to go see the Black Panther. They went in support of it. They wanted to show up. They wanted to dress up. They wanted to be part of the movement. They wanted to go to Wakanda forever. All of that was something that is very significant to me. And I was actually talking to my mom about, was it like this for coming to America? Because that's the only thing I can compare it to. And she said, no, she doesn't remember this big deal about coming to America as it is about the Black Panther. So, yeah, culturally, this is a huge win for us.
We would never have seen this movie in the 80s or the 90s. And I'm just sitting here also thinking about sort of the old guard politicians and what's happening to them versus younger politicians coming up, and this clash of diversity versus sort of Trump. This is the way it used to be, and we're going to try and bring it back. And I can only imagine some of the conversations that are happening in some communities about this film of just very racially charged, and I can't believe that this is happening in our country and all that kind of mess.
Yeah, I mean, it is a definite historical event for sure, and I don't think that's overstating it. I think it really represents a lot. B, I wanted to ask you what you felt like the importance of having a Black superhero on the big screen in a film that's been big, particularly in the role of hero. What's the importance of that to you personally? What's the importance of that to the African American community?
It means identity for me, for my son, for anyone else that's brown skin. It's having someone that looks like you, that resembles you, that have the same hair texture as you, that have the same skin color as you. It's one thing to look at Superman and Thor and Batman and say, oh man, that's cool, they're a superhero. But you don't personally identify with that person. It's basically a character to you. But to see a Black superhero, you feel like this could be you. This is someone that you could be. This is someone that you can grow up to be. And
I identified with the Swamp Thing as a child. I mean, he was legit my favorite. So, I mean, you're not alone.
I see the resemblance.
I do too. I was just going
especially
to say
with the emotional
same thing.
intelligence.
He cares about the environment,
Yeah, and that's what I always think of you, Frank, is the environment
Swamp
fighter.
creature, right?
But I must say, Eric Killmonger is definitely more identifiable than I imagined he would be. He is definitely, I have seen a lot of, a shift from the Black Panther to Eric just because of what he stood for and what he represented in the movie.
And I've heard a lot about that one of the reasons that Eric Killmonger, the Michael B. Jordan character, is one of the best, if not the best villain, is because people can relate and identify to his motives.
Mm-hmm.
And that really makes a phenomenal villain. It's like when somebody that maybe their intent or some idea of theirs people can relate to, but the means or the extremes they go about it, it's really when it's evil and malice comes into play. I mean, I've also heard that, quite honestly, maybe the most perfunctory or least interesting character in the whole film is Black Panther. He really is sort of like a standard superhero, but the world building and I think there's like mountain people or something, like a community, like the world that they're created. I've heard like you could have 5 or 10 more Marvel films just on the people that inhabit this world that people would just be interested in. Whereas
Right.
Black Panther is a Marvel superhero. He's kind of like the Captain America. He's the anchor. He's the representation of good and protection versus the most interesting character in the film.
No, I agree. It's
I
true.
wouldn't say he's the most interesting, but I also wouldn't say he's not as bland a superhero as Captain America, for example. He's actually, and part of that comes from Chadwick Boseman is just a very good actor who infuses him with some more depth, and the source material or the stuff that they're talking about, the themes they're talking about, bring depth to the character also. That's the last thing I wanted to ask about. There are a lot of themes that get woven into the movie, and themes of immigration, cultural integrity and heritage. There are lots of themes. Anything like that jump out for you, Bea? And I'll ask you also, Emma Kate, any of the big themes that the movie hit?
Well, Lupita's character, Nakia, definitely touches about social injustice or, just going outside of her utopia to help out people that she really doesn't have a reason to help out. So I definitely see a huge, a purposeful intent behind it. From the writer's perspective, I definitely see, okay, we don't want just this damsel in distress. We don't want just this female character who's just really beautiful or anything like that. We want her to have depth, and we want her to be able to do something more than any other, character that I've seen. So I saw that in Lupita's character.
Emma Kate, anything jump out at you thematically?
Yeah, I guess I kept thinking about this theme kind of that was woven about the colonialization of Africa and how all of these resources were taken away, whether it's by stealing children and males and women for slavery and taking them to other parts of the world, where it's almost like this world that is, they have their bubble that they're hiding in the mountains. Like that's what Africa could have been like had all of these, colonies not just taken away from them. So just kind of that idea and kind of how things were wrong, and then that isolationism and how they wanted to protect their resources. And so I just thought that was a really interesting and very true thought. And I liked that.
Yeah, it has a lot of angle. It's one of the few superhero movies that I want to see again, just to pick up on some more of those themes and think about them more. And I agree with what Jonathan said. This is a movie where Marvel put their money where their mouth is. They invested in what's on the screen. They invested in the story and in the cast. Think about this cast. 4 Oscar nominees in the cast, and that doesn't include Chadwick Boseman, Michael B. Jordan, and Sterling K. Brown, among others who are in the cast. So it definitely is a cut above normal superhero movie. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Shrink Tank podcast. We hope you'll check out shrinktank.com for great articles and videos. And we hope you'll follow us on Twitter at shrink_tank and like us on Facebook. And for questions and comments, we want you to write us at feedback@shrinktank.com. Our producer and music composer is Sean Beck. For Emma Kate Wright, Jonathan Hedderly, Bea Moise, and Frank Gaskell in Charlotte, I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville. Tell all your friends about us and make it a great week.
Shrink Tank.